All right, I got the bezel off on the radio, and both glasses, the glass for here and for up here, are, I don't know if you can see it, scuzz with nicotine. That's nicotine on the end. See that? Looks like rust. It's nicotine. Now, you remember this is from a, what would you call it? A pet-free, smoke-free home. My ass. All right? Typical eBay, e-dumpster. Now, what I want to talk to you about has nothing to do with this radio, but sort of it does. Now, what I want to talk to you about is the difference between a short and an open. And I'll give you an example. On my last video, I told you about a car, large Chevy, almost like a Cadillac. Every time the guy slammed the car door, a 30 amp fuse would blow because somebody broke a cigarette lighter when they were out for the night with my friend, a group of people, and instead of saying, "Hey Sal, the cigarette lighter broke." "Oh, okay, put it down on the floor or hand it to me." They put the pieces back down in the hole for the cigarette lighter. So every time somebody would slam the door of the car hard, the fuse would blow. And that fuse, I believe, was used for something else. Now, when you slam the car door, the pieces of the cigarette lighter would short out. That's a short. It's a temporary short. It's an intermittent. And the reason it would blow the fuse is because it wasn't the element that heats up to light the cigarette. It was just maybe a screw or whatever it was that was now down in there sitting on the contacts for the cigarette lighter. So that would be an intermittent short. It's blowing the fuse. It's not an open. An open is when you have no current flow. And I'm now going to tell you a story about what an open looks like when you find it. All right, so Sal, same guy. He goes to his friend who has an auto repair center, and he says to his friend, "I can't get the wipers to work." So the friend changes the wiper motor. That doesn't fix it. He changes, I believe there's a relay on that car. He changes the relay. He then changes the switch. And then he tells Sal, "I've changed everything. It still doesn't work." So, of course, my doorbell gets rung. And Sal says, "I have a short in my car." I said, "Oh, you're blowing a fuse like the last time?" "No, no, no. The wipers just don't work." And I said, "Well, that's not a short. If you had a short, when you turn the wipers on, you'd blow a fuse. Or you'd smell something burning. That's what a short is. What you have is an open." So he went and got the book from the guy. And just a few minutes ago, I remember the guy's name. I can't think of his name. But he went and got the book for the car, the electrical manual. And it's quite thick. And I dialed through the thing. And I'm looking at the, off to the side, they have the wiper switch, maybe the relay, and the motor. Sometimes I think the relay might have been on the back of the motor. And then other models had intermittents. They could intermittently turn the wipers on and off. Anyway, I'm looking at it, how many wires are involved, and I start troubleshooting it. And I troubleshot it a different way. I used the ohm meter. I put an extension wire on the out of it, one of the leads, and I had Sal touch the wires on the plug on the wiper, the windshield wiper motor unit. And I'm touching around on the inside. I'm looking at the schematic in the book, and I'm saying at least two of these wires go directly from the switch out to the motor, because you have two. Remember, you got a couple speeds, so there's a little bit difference. So he's doing it. He isn't getting any reading at all. So I'm going through the book. I'm going back and forth. I'm tracing the wires through the firewall, and I'm not really getting anywhere. So I decided to go from the motor and follow those wires down up against the firewall. Well, it gets to this thing, and I never saw that. I don't work on cars. On the firewall was a giant connector. I mean, a really large connector. And what I had to do was, well, first of all, I had to look at the book back and forth, and then finally, one of the pages show the wires going to this firewall plug. And I'm like, why did they do it that way? Well, I guess for waterproofing or whatever. So in the middle of it is a giant bolt. And it's like you need a ratchet to undo the bolt. And then this giant plug comes off. And that plug, it takes all the wiring from the firewall side into the inside of the car. Any wire that runs inside. Some lights. Anyway, a bunch of wires. So I'm looking and I'm like, how do you get this thing? So I start probing around. All of a sudden I realize there's a big wad of grease on this nut. And I flick it out of the way, and now I see that it's a nut or a bolt that it's going to need a ratchet wrench. So I get my ratchet wrench, I put it on there, and I crack it loose. Take the bolt out. Now I start working this giant plug off, and it comes off the firewall. And as soon as I look down in there, water comes out. And I look at Sal, I go, you went through water that deep? Well, you know, I had to get to a certain place. This is how Sal always was. He wouldn't tell you, I went through water that was too deep, and now certain things on the car don't work. And there were a lot of stories like that with his cars. And every time I'd fix up a car he bought, used, he would sell it and buy a bigger car. So we kept going up, and then we went through the boat stage. He wanted me working on his boat. Well, anyway, I refused to work on the boat, and he did bring it up to the yard for me to work on. He wanted me to go all the way down the shore to work on his boat. Well, anyway, we're back to this thing. Now I got this connector, and water comes out. So I go in the house, I get the hair dryer out, old-fashioned hair dryer, and I dry everything really good. And now I look down, and I can see some of the connections are rusted. And I'm saying, well, how long ago? Oh, I think it was 2 weeks ago. You know, the whole story. And I'm looking at connections. And then there are connections in there that look like they were rusted years before. So I'm like, you know, this is going to be a bitch. You got to lean over the car. It's dirty. And I don't like doing that kind of work. That's why I got into electronics that wasn't automotive. I like sitting at a nice clean bench with a nice oscilloscope, maybe a signal generator. That's how I am. I don't like getting my hands dirty. So anyway, it hit me. I have this Dremel tool, and it had these weird attachments. And one of them was a little tiny wire brush. So I went and I got it, and he's like questioning me, where'd you get that? What's that? I said, stop. That's what he would do to me. He always wanted to own what I owned. And he wanted me to explain everything. So look, I'm going to use this Dremel tool. I'm going to put it on the slow speed. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to wire brush the connections that are rusty. And I said, that's the best I can do for you. You know, oh, in the interim too is, I went inside the car on the switch for the wiper and put the long leaded meter, and I had him touch the leads outside that were rusted, and he got continuity to the inside of the car. And then we went from the connector up to the wiper motor, and we got continuity. So I knew right there was the problem. And that's not a short, that's an open. The wires through the rust weren't making enough connection of a connection to power the motor. Now probably if we had a meter on the motor and I threw the switch on, you probably see some current going through the rust. Well, anyway, so I wire wheel each one of the connections that's rusted or tarnished, and then I put the connection back on gently and tighten the bolt. And he goes in and he throws the wipers on. They come right on. So he's like, well, you fell in the short. I said, stop saying it was a short. It's an open. And then he goes, hey, my gas meter, my gas tank is reading correctly. I'm like, at first when he said gas tank, I'm like, oh crap, we lost the float level of the gas tank through wires that come up. No, he says, I always had to guess how much gas I had. He goes, now that's working also. That was the set of wires that was more damaged than the ones I found. I found the ones that were more of a high current running a motor, but that's an open. It's rusted, it's still an open. It's not shorting out, it's not burning anything, it's not blowing a fuse. Now, when I was in tech school and we were in the final months, it was amazing how many of those guys brought stuff in to troubleshoot. And they'd say to the teacher, I have a short in here. And they had an open. They didn't know the difference. They've gone 18 months in electronics, and in their mind, they don't understand a short. And I'll give you one other sort of short story. Uh, I was running wires from the back of a car. The first thing I would do is on the old cars, you open the two doors, and there's a plate on the inside of the car by the rug. There's like 3 screws. You undo that screws, and there's a channel that you can run through there, and you can go almost all the way to the back of the trunk and fish the wire. So you can come through with a CB antenna wire, and then up to the front of the car, and then up to under the dash, and nobody would see the wire. Well, I got these numbskulls that instead of paying me, I was a slice of pizza and a soda to do it, they would run the wire themselves. And then the other guy that worked with me, he was trying to help them. What they would do is they'd run the wire under the wire frame for the back seat. And then when you would sit in the seat, you would crush the wire for the antenna. And you wouldn't cause a short, but when you did the SWR of the antenna, it would show that something was seriously wrong. Your SWR was way through the roof, almost like a short, but it's not a short. It's a, what would we call it? It's an RF shunt. In other words, when you collapse the outer jacket of the wire, the braid, to the center of the wire that's in an insulation, it's not touching, but the capacitance inductive ratio of the wire, its impedance, changes, and the SWR meter sees it as a short. So a lot of energy, instead of leaving the antenna, hits that point and reflects back to the radio. And some radios, when you key the mic, you shouldn't see a red light come on in the SWR meter. If it was, that's showing your SWR is too high. On certain models, some models, the SWR meter only lit up, tell you, so you could read it. It didn't have that feature. And the guy would come up to the Radio Shack, pull up in the fire zone. I'd come out and he says, look, he says, when I key the mic, he says the red light comes on in the SWR meter. And I'm realizing this is a guy that wouldn't pay me a slice of pizza and a soda. I'm like, I said, was it good? He said, it was good for a few weeks and suddenly went bad. One of the tricks was, it's not a total short, but they would unscrew the base mount antenna on the back of the trunk to go through the car wash. And then that little base piece that stays on the trunk fills up with water. So you have water between the center conductor and ground inside that little cup. So all you have to do is soak it out with a paper towel. But that's not a dead short, but it's sort of short. It's an RF short. And in your mind, you have to understand the difference between an open and a short to be any good in electronics. And it really annoyed me when I'd be listening to somebody tell me their son how smart he was, and he couldn't find something, and he keeps telling his mother he's got a short. And I'm there because he has an open. And I'm trying to explain it to him, and you see their eyes like they smoke too much pot, and their eyes are like drifting off into space like they're on another planet. And I say to them, you got an open. You don't have a connection somewhere. And then when you find it and show them that they don't have a connection, was that causing the short? You're like, how freaking stupid are you? But in the mind of a lot of people, they don't understand a short. You know, short is basically the electrons aren't going the full path. They're crossing over at some point and going back to the battery or back to the power supply. In a short path, the path is shorter, it's a short. When it doesn't make it at all, that's an open. It's real simple. Electronics is like really simple if you start catching it from day one. You know, you visualize the electrons flowing through the wire. Now, you get that down pat, you know, from the electron flow is from the minus to the positive. Conventional flow, engineers use the electrons, or not the electrons, the current flows from positive to minus. So when you work with someone that's an engineer, you say, are we talking electrons or are we talking conventional current? And they like to jump back and forth when they make a mistake. I do that misspeaking now because I'm older and I sometimes get confused when I'm explaining to you. What I'm saying in my head comes out differently. It's hilarious when I play the video back. But there's so many instances where a person does not know the simple stuff in electronics. Now, you'll say to someone, and you want to see people, their eyeballs glaze over. It's like you point inside a radio, an old radio, and you say, that's Litz wire. And they look at you like you're crazy. And you say, that's multiple strands of insulated wire, tiny insulated wires, bundled together as a long wire. And the reason is as electrons flow in a wire, they form a magnetic field. And the magnetic field pushes the electrons on the outside of the wire. So if you have one big thick wire, the surface area is only on the surface of the wire. The electrons aren't flowing in the middle of the wire. So if you want good Q in a coil at lower frequencies, you use multiple wires that are insulated from each other. And it's usually wrapped in, sometimes it's got a cotton cover over it. That's Litz wire. So the amount of surface that the electrons can travel on is greater because they use a bunch of smaller wires. And once you can see that in your head, you're almost there. But there's people that's just stereo. And my father was good for that. If I said to my father, that's a piece of Litz wire, and he didn't know that each strand was insulated from the other one. And then you start telling him about when electrons flow, it was just a waste of time because a week later he would just give you that blank look. See, I'm really into electronics. I had trouble with English. I had trouble with history, remembering the exact dates. But when it comes to visualizing what is wrong with something, I can actually visualize it. I got lucky that way. And I just wanted to tell you the difference between a short and an open. I gave you some examples. Another real quick one was a kid across the street back in New Jersey. He stops at a stop sign, and a guy comes up behind him and hits him in the back and breaks one of the taillights. And in those days, it was like 6 bolts to unbolt the taillight assembly, and you get another one from the junkyard, and you bolt it on. So he tells me the whole story. He says, yeah, I got hit from behind, and I put the new taillight in, and it's not working right. So I go over there, and as soon as I look in the hood, I went and got a flashlight. I lift the hood up, the trunk up on the car, and I click the flashlight, and I look, and I said, you caught wires between when you tightened it down. You got wires trapped in there from the wiring harness. He's just staring at me. Would that make a difference? I was like, oh, brother. I said, you pinched those wires, and you pinched them and cut into those wires. And the frame of the light is metal that goes to ground. So when you cut into those wires, you're shorting them to ground. I said, you blew fuses also. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you. Yeah. So I said to him, I said, undo these bolts, pull the wiring out, and I said, look for some broken wires. And I just walked away. But some people have no concept of just, well, they don't even pay attention when they're doing stuff. Let's put it that way. You know, they put things upside down. The next door to me, the plumbers came down. They put a new faucet on the outside of the house, and because the other one got gummed up with stuff in there, minerals. So they soldered a new faucet on the front of the house, and it was facing up. And I told the woman, and she says, no, they're professionals. And I said, that faucet's upside down. When you turn it on, it's going to shoot up. No. That's how she talked. No. So a few weeks later, she's ringing my doorbell. There's something wrong with my faucet. When I turn it on, it shoots me in the face. I said, well, call up your professional friends. And then I closed the door on her. But this is what I went through. This is why I am the way I am, because I was the guy that when something went wrong, they came and got me. I would show them what's wrong, and then they would argue with me. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But this radio here is from a pet-free, smoke-free environment. So I guess the radio was smoking cigarettes and nicotined up. And this is glass. I don't know if you can see it. It's nicotine. That brown shit is nicotine. But luckily, what's my favorite elixir? Remember I told you about Windex? What's in Windex? Did you remember? Water, number one ingredient. Number two, remember surfactant? That's a type of detergent, surfactant, cheap detergent. So you got water, surfactant, you got some ammonia in Windex. That breaks the surface tension of grease. So does the surfactant. And then don't forget the blue dye. You got to have the blue dye or it's not Windex. I think that's it. All right, that's it.